Okay, the demonstration is the double-axis square-turn bowl, and as part of the I guess uniqueness of this project is the name. It's double-axis because first you're going to turn something this direction, and then you're going to turn it around and turn it that direction, which is a double axis. And then when you cut it apart on the bandsaw, you come up with a square face. So it's a double-axis square-turn bowl. I made this piece on a lathe. I use a one-way. It's about the same size as this. I turned this piece on a mini lathe just to make sure you could do it on a mini lathe, which you can. You just use an 8-inch disc instead of a 12-inch disc. There's that. And I'm going to have my wife pass these two around so you can look at them. This is a Mark Gardner project. I took a class at Aeromont with Mark Gardner. He's an excellent turner, and this is one of the pieces you make when you take Mark's class. This is a piece that Mark Gardner turned. He sells these in art galleries. And so I'm keeping this one up here because I had to pay a few bucks for this one. But that's out of a piece of walnut. He taught us to use milk paint, and then use sand to let the grain show through, and then put a finish over that. And so the ones I'm passing around, it's also milk paint. Milk paint's a great finish to use if you want that type of design on your work. For the double-axis square-turn bowl, you start with 2 pieces of dry stock. This is extremely hard maple, and as I keep it in my garage for years and years, it keeps getting harder, so it is extremely hard, and I'll pass a piece around. You can see how hard. But you glue it up. You put a piece of, it's best if you use 3/4 stock in the center, and I like to use Gorilla Glue because it expands. And you'll notice there's a bit of a warp on some of these, and it fills that expansion and it holds better. So I use Gorilla Glue for this project. After you have it glued up, you find center, but not center of the entire piece, just center of your board that you use in the middle. You mark that center. Draw a line to mark that axis. See if I can get it in there. There we go. This is my wood turning pencil, by the way. You have to find a tree that's got lead in it to find that pencil. Anyway, you do that on both sides and then mark the center. I've done that with a piece already to save time. We won't wait till the glue dries. You can pass that chunk of firewood around. This is the piece that I've already marked the axis. I used a 1/2-inch piece of wood in there. You should use 3/4 because if you use 3/4, it will cover the marks made by your spur drive. This doesn't quite cover them, so when I turn the face of the bowl, I'll have to turn it a little lower to get that mark off from the face drive. Also, I went to the bandsaw and I cut off the edges, and you want to save those edges for later. I'll show you what you save them for, but these are the corners that came off that. That just makes it a little easier when you start to turn. So cut those off and save them. I found when you go out and demonstrate, it's always a trick to figure out the lathe you're not used to. So it's always good to start by giving excuses. So if something goes awry, it's probably the lathe. I didn't mention that I've been turning now for 13 years. My hobby since junior high has been woodworking. One of my hobbies, also hunting, fishing, gardening. And so I kind of split my time between all sorts of things. And lately it's my grandkids, which are 4-year-old twins, but they live in Houston, Texas, so it's a ways away. Anyway, well, my wife and I quite a few times have gone to Aramont to take classes. I would encourage anyone to do that. We call it our cruise because the food is great, the people you meet's great. They're all interested in doing the same thing that you do. So if you have an opportunity to go to any of the art and craft schools, go and enjoy yourself. Also, I've taken advantage of the club demonstrators. We did have Trent Bosch a while back. He's a great turner, so take advantage of that opportunity. Always watch how they hold the tool, how they approach the wood. Let's do a little turning. First thing to do is to round this piece. And I'm going to make sure that the lathe speed is low, if I can see where my speed is. When you feel the lathe start to vibrate, you're probably going fast enough. So if you're turning on a mini lathe, that's going to occur faster than one this heavy. Face shield is a wise idea. Thank you. That's easy to forget when you're demonstrating up here. I usually turn with a full respirator. I've got a nice dust collection system and a filtration system, but I like to use the full respirator with an air pack too. It's the fine dust that'll get you. It's not the dust you can see. The trick in turning these round, you want to keep this cylinder as square as possible, and so you want to line your tool rest up as best you can so it's parallel with the lathe, and then use your finger as a guide, and that will pretty much keep you so that your cylinder will be straight. I've been working on my Woodturner stomach. I noticed some of the guys that have a pretty good sized stomach can really get that wedged in there, and it really makes it stable. Anyway, we're starting to get there. Some of it's going to be rough. I don't know if you can see it, how it's roughing out. You don't have to worry about that till you get it round, and then we'll square it up. Later we'll do this cut to smooth it down. You'll find a lot of the professional turners will tell you, now this tool won't work. Well, it won't work the way they use the tool, and they want to sell you their tool, so be careful. You can probably make it work. I've taken enough classes to realize there's probably 4 or 5 different ways you can do the same thing, and there's probably 4 or 5 different tools you can use. Find what's comfortable for you and then use it. Also, I've learned, I guess, the way most turners learn. Once you become comfortable with your tools, you'll wind up using about 4 tools. You'll have a whole garage full of tools, but you'll never use them. I have the same situation. But it looks good when people come and visit. Now as you get more to round, you can turn that speed up a little bit and hurry the process along. I've learned over the years to use an underhand grip. I took some classes from English turners. English turners always use an underhand grip. They say that you have better control of your tool, especially if you're doing delicate work like thin turning and so forth, spindle work. If you have that overhand grip, you tend to push or pull the tool, and you really put too much pressure on the wood. Sometimes, you know, when you turn, you'll feel that vibration in the wood. And it's probably because you're giving too much forward motion into the wood that causes that. And so if you can use that underhand grip, you'll become a better turner. There was a session going on turning session in England, and somebody started turning and they were like this, and somebody yelled from the back, "Oh, he's a bloody overhander." And it was like the guy wanted to get up and walk out just because the guy was using overhand grip. But again, if that's what you're comfortable with and it works for you, why not? The reason I use dry wood for this project, it's going to be left thick. And those that's coming around, you can tell how thick it is. And often if you use wet wood and you leave it that thick, it's going to crack. So use dry wood if you can find it. Before I go much further, I want to thank those people who set up today. I've been there and worked on that, and often you go, people don't think about it, but setting up and taking down and cleaning up is a lot of work, so I do appreciate that. Thank you. Now, that's getting fairly smooth, although there's some tool lines in there. I'll make about one more pass. Typically what I would do is go to the sharpener before I made that last pass. To save time today, I brought 3 different gouges of the same size, so instead of sharpening when I feel like I need it, I'm just going to switch gouges. But normally I'd go to the sharpener, and I notice mine gives it a little different profile, so if I can avoid it, I will. If I need to, I do appreciate you bringing in the sharpener, however. I'm going to go slow and delicate on the final pass, and that gets it smooth. Although on most of these bowls, I'm going to texture it anyway, because when I use the milk paint, I want there to be some dips in there, so when I sand off the milk paint, some of the grain will show through. Okay. After you get that down and smooth, the next thing you want to do is mark this axis, and that's why you've marked here and here. To get it square, you've got a line here and a line here, and you can join those 2 points. I'm going to do that. I was turning in a group and a lady asked me, "Where did you get that pencil?" I said, "Well, they come from lead trees, and all the limbs have a piece of lead right down the center." But truthfully, I got it at Marshall's. It's one of those things you see one time and then you never see it again. Okay, the next thing you do is to find center. Before I took that off there, I would have checked that with my calipers to make sure that I have a cylinder that doesn't vary from one side to the other. I'm not going to take the time to do that today, but we'll just do a quick test. I think it looks fairly good, because it'll never turn out square if you don't square that up. Just a little heavy on that side. That's good. When you've marked center, I like to use an awl to make a divot to put the live center and the spur drive in. That way you don't have to fumble around with it when you get it on the lathe. Now this is where it gets exciting for the front row folks, but we've got the shield, so don't worry. It's also where you want to be sure you keep your fingers on this side of the tool rest, because this gets a little trickier. Again, you want to make sure that this remains straight. It's harder at this point because when you get out here, you're going to be turning more air, and so this tool's going to want to draw in, and that will make it a curve, and so you'll have an odd, you won't have a square bowl anymore, it'll be an odd shape. So again, you use your index finger with the underhand grip to slide along that, set this up parallel. This is where you really want to wear a face shield. And turn your speed down. That was not a good sign. My wood's getting so hard it's chipping out. So you want dry wood, but not rock hard like I have here probably. I got this wood. There used to be a company up north that made industrial sieves, and they used this hard maple, and they took the ends and they just throw them away. They were using them for firewood, whatnot. Well, some of the Turners found out about it, and we took pickup loads of this nice wood that we could use. Some of it was cracked and some of it had knots, but a lot of it was nice stuff. But we learned it eats up your tools real quick. You have to keep sharpening your tool. That's not straight. When turning these ends, it's a little better when you can increase the speed, because your tool won't draw in as much. The solid wood comes around a little faster. Tool rest close. Okay, you use your calipers because when it's this, you want to keep it the same width. I need to come down just a little bit more. To get square, you've got to be the same width on both sides of the axis. Okay, my wife's telling me my time's up, and so there's a little bit of tool mark here, but I'm going to stop here and pass this piece around. Typically what you do at this point, you take this to your bandsaw, and you're going to cut this on this line right here to split that down. Now again, I'm safety conscious, so don't just go up there and shove this, because there's no flat side down here. And even though you're good at the bandsaw, it's going to turn on you and it's going to kick back. The bandsaw, people lose more digits from a bandsaw than almost any other saw, with the exception of a radial arm saw. The reason being, your bandsaw doesn't make that much noise, and so you feel safer with it. You're not, because you're always sticking your thumbs out there when you push the thing through. Be careful. Slide that through, or send that. So the way to avoid getting your thumbs in the way, I told you to save those corners that you cut off. Take a piece of scrap wood, make something like this. You cut that groove so that when you put the wood in it, you're going to put it this way, and I didn't put a board between these. but you want it so it sets high, it doesn't rub the bottom. And you're going to set it this way. And then you're going to take some masking tape. I'm not going to waste your tape. But you tape that down once you get it lined up with the bandsaw. Make sure you're in line with the bandsaw so it cuts it straight. Wrap your tape around it several times, and then you can push this through without that moving. Okay? But you use those wedges under here before you put your tape on. Now you can tape it up. Cut them so they don't, if you put it that way, your fence on your saw rubs right here. You've got it so it won't move. You're stable, your hands are out of the way. Okay? You can use that jig with a lot of oddly shaped things to get through your bandsaw and still have all of your digits. So, take two 2x4s. Make a line in the center of your 2x4s, which I did. And on one of them, we've got a center line. On one of them, I marked the width of a 2x4 by just going 3/4 of an inch this way, 3/4 of an inch that way. And so that's the width of a 2x4. I've got both centers marked. And then I put a mark 3/4 of an inch from the edge of this 2x4 and 3/4 of an inch from that 2x4. And then, to get your proper radius for your jig, the piece that's going around, once you cut it in half, you're going to use half of the width of that square that you just turned. Half the width. That will give you the radius of that arc. Okay? And you're going to mark, starting on this side, and put an arc here, and then starting on this side 3/4 of an inch back, you're going to put an arc here. And the reason you back up 3/4 of an inch is so when you mount your bowl in this jig, it's going to set proud by 3/4 of an inch. It gives you space then to shave down the face of the bowl. Then you're going back to the bandsaw, you're going to cut these two arcs, and you're also going to cut this line out. So when you do that, you'll have some pieces that look like this. One side is here that you've cut out. The other side looks like this that you've cut. The reason you cut them that way is you're going to mount those on if you have a lathe this side, a 12-inch board. If you've got a mini, an 8-inch board that's cut into a circle. This is for the mini lathe. This is for the bigger lathe. And you might have one that, mine has a 24-inch throw, so I can go bigger than this. And again, you mark a crisscross pattern exactly centered, and that's where you're going to put these 2x4s. You're going to mount them on that disc. This way, I screw them onto the back. To hold them in place before I screw them, I use double stick tape and tape those down. The other thing to make certain, and these are a little off, right in here, this has to exactly match up with the bottom of that arc. If it doesn't, your bowl will stand proud of this arc and it won't hold. Luckily, I have a drum sander, and so I can go to the drum sander and play with that until I get it just right. I use screws in the back of that. Do not use sheetrock screws. I know we always have sheetrock screws laying around. That's the first thing we grab. But believe me, at some point you'll break the head off that sheetrock screw. You won't know it until you put it on the lathe. It'll crack your face shield or slap you in the chest. That hurts. Use a wood screw or at least a deck screw to screw those on. When you have that done, your jig will look like this. Got your screws in the bottom. This is nice in there. And then to hold hold this in place. It's going to mount in here like this. You're going to put first masking tape. I learned this from my wife. Florists do this. You take masking tape and you put enough masking tape on the back of this so that any glue that we use will not be on your work. Masking tape has a little mastic, but it's a lot easier to get off than the glue. So I put about 4 pieces of masking tape this way and 4 pieces this way. When I have that done, I take my hot glue gun, which I won't do today. It's already heated up and the glue's dripping out at the nose. Put an old board under it or you get glue all over everything. But you're going to put 2 strips of glue this way, 2 strips of glue this way. Glue that to your jig. I did this at home, so I didn't check, and hopefully that glue is going to hold. And you can see that it's glued to the masking tape. So when I pop this off, the glue will come off fairly easy. Okay, that's just hot glue. Now the good thing about this jig, when you think about it, it's not only this project, but any odd piece of wood, you can make a jig like this and turn it, and then your friends will be impressed. They'll wonder, well, how in the world did you turn that? Because the bottom is not flat, and you made a jig for your lathe. Now again, I mentioned before there are several ways that you can do these things. I use a screw chuck. You could turn a place in there to expand, or you can put a whatever on there, but because I've got it centered, this seems to work best for me. Now this really makes a fan, and this is where you really don't want to get your hands over there. If you do, you're going to do it one time, and you'll never do this again. Again, this is where it's important to wear the face shield, because those pieces of that plank will come off when you get past the glue. Always reach clear around that thing. Coming. Here again, you want to try to keep this surface as flat as you can. Okay, I would check to make sure that's flat, but today I'm going to go on. The rest of it is basically bowl turning. This is chipped on that side, so I'd have to go down a little lower to get past that chip. Okay, and you turn until you have a bowl. On the ones I passed around, I use a carver to carve the grooves in on the back, and my air tool to put the texturing on. You're going to have a bowl that looks like this, and you can take it and put whatever surface design you want on there. And in the interest of time, I'm going to stop here rather than go ahead and continue with that. You're going to take the screws out. When you do, you can pop that, and these pop right off. Then off that tape. And your blank will look like this. And what you do, you put your blank on here, you put this up here, and you spin it at a very slow speed, and you take a pencil and you make, it's great if you're a deer hunter because you can use this for a target later in November, but you make a series of lines on here so that it looks like, I don't know if you can see those lines, looks like a target. It's on there, and then what you do, you take this and you place it so that each corner is on the same line. Then you hold it and bring up your tailstock, and you turn that, with this here you'll turn the divot out with the tailstock. I use a detail gouge, which is basically a spindle gouge with a very severe point on it, a pretty severe angle. That way you can get in there easier. And I make that little divot working around this cone. You get in there, and then you'll have, when you're done, you'll have a little nub. And I use a little palm carver to get those nubs off. It works great. A little sanding, you're ready to go. And that's how I make that divot in the bottom so that it sets flat. Okay? But you have some other things to do, so I'm not going to show that this morning.
Thank you.
Okay.